Last week I finished up talking about verse 7 of Philippians chapter 4, which reads, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." From what we've read, Paul lived his life with that peace from God. I also talked about our focus and asked you to consider what you're focused on during these challenging times. What do you think Paul spent his time thinking about in prison? I believe he gives us a pretty good idea of the types of things he thought about in verses 8 and 9, in which he states, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." Paul didn't just tell us what to do in chapter 4 of Philippians. He told us how to accomplish it. In verse 8, Paul gives us a long list of things that we should think about. That list of things directs our focus. Think about this list for a minute. Whatever is true. Truth is sometimes difficult to identify in this day and age of social media. So often you need to consider the source to help you determine if it's truth or not. I believe Paul would tell us that God is the source of all truth. The Bible is truth. As Christians, we are to live our lives being truthful in our interactions with others. Whatever is honorable. In other words, what is worthy of honor around you? When someone acts selflessly towards someone else, or when people put their lives on the line for others, you get the idea. I believe Paul would tell us that Jesus did that with his life and that he is worthy of honor. Whatever is just. For something to be considered just, it would be guided by truth and reason and fairness. We need to think in terms of being just in our thoughts. I believe that Paul would tell us that God is the originator of being just. Whatever is pure. When I think of the word pure, I think of something that is not contaminated by its surroundings. We live in a world contaminated by sin. It manifests itself in so many ways. Sometimes it's hard to find things of purity around us. We need to look for and consider those things that are pure around us. I believe Paul would tell us that God's love for us is pure. Whatever is lovely. This phrase brings thoughts of beauty to my mind. Sunrises and sunsets, and flowers, and an eagle in flight. The list can go on and on and on. But I believe Paul would tell us that God created the world we live in to be a thing of beauty. What sin has not tainted remains lovely. Whatever is commendable. Other versions of the Bible use admirable. There are many things around us that are worthy of admiring. I believe Paul would tell us that God is always worthy of our admiration. It's good to think of things that are commendable, admirable. If there is any excellence, there are stories and videos readily available of people all around us that are achieving great feats of excellence. Maybe it's in music, maybe the arts, sports, technology, the list goes on. But how often have you heard someone make the statement regarding a person that achieves an uncommon level of excellence in their field as having that gift or being gifted. I believe that Paul would tell us that God is the giver of that gift. If there is anything worthy of praise, what are the things and events and circumstances and people around you that are praiseworthy? We've all seen them if we think about it. If we spend some of our mental energy recounting the things around us, we will see things that are worthy of praise. I believe God would tell us to look for God in the midst of those praiseworthy things. You know, this is quite a list of things for us to think about. All of these things that we are to think of are good. All of these things direct our focus and point us to God. There are many people and things that will compete for our attention, and some may appear to be good on the surface. As Christ followers, we need to pay attention to the things we spend our time and energy thinking about. How do the things that are holding our attention stack up against the list of things that Paul gives us as the standard? Paul goes on in verse 9 and makes a very bold statement that he could only make if he 100% believes and practices in his own life. And he stated, "What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." You know, he was showing us as well as telling us how to live out a life with Christ, regardless of the circumstances surrounding us. He pointed to himself, the things he taught and modeled with his life, and said, "Follow my example." But by pointing to himself, Paul was ultimately pointing to God. He also made it clear that it was a lifelong pursuit. He told us to practice these things. That means to keep working at it every day. Not to let up, but keep working at living your life for God in this manner. You know, Paul also wrote to the church in Rome in chapter 8, verses 5 and 6. He said, "For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. For to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace." Did you catch what he said? As Christ followers, we need to set our minds on the things of the Spirit, on godly things. He says that will bring us life and peace, regardless of our circumstances. What types of things are you spending your mental energy on? What monopolizes your thoughts these days? How do they match up to Paul's list? We can have peace in this world, even when there's all kinds of crud in our lives. I encourage you to read Philippians chapter 4 sometime today and review it for yourself. Everything that Paul wrote. It could be life-changing. I hope this devotion has been an encouragement to you and maybe gives you something to consider in your life today. God bless.